GamerGate in current year is probably something you're thinking of if you've read any of the news outlets or read anything by game journalists. It seems like almost every other thing, every other scandal gets compared to GamerGate. But more specifically, who was GamerGate? Today, we're going to be talking about one of the main key players of GamerGate, Zoe Quinn. Zoe Quinn may be a name you've heard in passing, or someone was talking about GamerGate. Perhaps you know her as one of the biggest victims or liars of GamerGate. Is Zoe Quinn the Helen of Troy of the gaming industry, or is she just another run-of-the-mill snake oil salesman? But before we get into today's video, I guess this is your trigger warning. So today we're going to talk about sexual assault, abuse. I think TikTok calls it unaliving, self-destruction, numerous different ways, drug abuse. So if you guys don't like that, you can turn this video off and watch, I don't know, like I said, puppies on TikTok or something. Something not this. Also, to address the pronouns thing, so Zoe identifies as non-binary, but I'm going to refer to her as she, her, even though she has she, they pronouns, because it just makes sense contextually, so she, her for now. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about the story of the face of GamerGate, Zoe Quinn. Zoe Tiberius Quinn was born on January 11, 1987, and named Chelsea Van Valkenburg, which is a pretty good name, I must say. It's pretty cool, actually. I don't know why she changed it, but, you know, to each his own. Zoe, then, Chelsea at the time, was a fairly introverted child, a typical lonely girl, if you will. She grew up in poverty and was an introvert pretty much up until when she was a teenager. She was diagnosed with depression at 14, and she said her school district had less than an understanding about teens with depression and suicidal issues, as what typical lonely, depressed teens do nowadays. Zoe turned to video games and internet chat rooms / forums to talk about her day and issues. Back in the early 2000s, you had to search out specific forums or use AOL chat or internet relay chat. This is how Zoe got the bulk of her interactions with people online. Zoe would later admit she would especially attack women because all she wanted was male approval from her peers, even if it meant plaguing her own insecurities as a bisexual woman at the time.
I demonized all things girly to my friends in the chat rooms that I got most of my socialization in, partially because that behavior was rewarded and reinforced by my nerdy compatriots who agreed that I was totally not like those other girls. I used the phrase attention whore the way telegrams say stop, and took pride in my ability to take the mocking, disrespectful tits or get the fuck outs of my male friends and turn it back around on them, and usually using awful homophobic slurs because I was dealing with the fact that I was queer, couldn't tell anybody, and didn't understand that about myself. But, you know, I would just hit back harder because I wasn't like those other girls. I was a cool girl, and cool girls don't show weakness. Weakness is for other girls, and if I just told myself that enough, I was hoping it would be true someday. I'm pretty sure there's a word for that.
An attention whore. Zoe also turned to drugs in her teens as a form of coping mechanism. She would try every drug that didn't involve shooting or snorting, quote unquote. She got married at the age of 19, in her words, purely for the benefits. Using men for her own financial gain is a reoccurring theme in Zoe's life. In 2007, Zoe came up with a fake porn star name of Block Valentine. She would then model for softcore pornography websites, Broken Dolls, and Deviant Nation. Finally, appropriate names for our girl Zoe. After a week of doing porn, she became a stripper in upstate New York. In typical Zoe fashion, she would complain about her stripper job on her blog. She then admitted on the same blog that she blacked out and started hitting a man that sexually assaulted her at the club. This incident wasn't mentioned at all in her book. A book about her getting harassed by several campaigns by men. This specific situation of her getting assaulted was not mentioned one time in her book. I should know. I have it. But more on that later. Zoe was also a member of the Something Awful forums and would often frequent the Hell Dump board. It was a board specifically made to call out any problematic users. And here you are thinking cancel culture's a new thing. The board was initially made with the intention of pointing out the pedophiles in the forums so that they could be properly ridiculed and banned from the website. But it actually went from pedo wrangling to the bully zone. If you weren't cool enough for the Something Awful users, which we all know is the pinnacle of cool, you would be bullied and harassed off of that website. These targeted harassment campaigns led to several death threats trying to destroy people's livelihoods, their jobs, schools, and allegedly someone taking their own life. This situation led to confirmed kill celebration posts and what would cause the whole Helldump forum to be nuked and wiped from the website. In 2011, Zoe, now 24, moved from New York to Canada to get started in a career in video game programming. Her inspiration to move came from a 6-week course on how to make video games that she saw advertised in the newspaper. Zoe said, "I felt like I finally found my calling." On February 14, 2013, Zoe released her game, Depression Quest. It's an HTML text-based video game that gives the player several options to decide their fate while dealing with depression. You heard me right. HTML-based browser game. So you have the actual web page, you click the link, and it opens up a new web page. That's the game! So it's not even made with Flash like most games that are choose your own adventure or something like visual novels. It's just a web page. So when this was first released, it had some critics, some tomatoes thrown at it. Zoe complained about the harassment she was getting from Wizardchan at the time. Wizardchan quotes them as verbatim as, "A Japanese-inspired image board for male virgins to share their thoughts and discuss their interests and lifestyle as a virgin. The name of our website is inspired by the wizard meme, which refers to someone who has maintained his virginity past the age of 30. In contrast to other image boards, Wizardchan is dedicated exclusively to people who have no sexual experience." She's the one responsible. Of course a woman can never relate to anyone here. She would never be with a truly depressed person. Can someone mail her a rant or a link to this thread? God, I hate that cunt. Succubus infiltrator, please go. All females are sluts and have no rights to be depressed. They can just go out into the street, lie down with their hole open, and have any man come and solve their problems. But they would still be depressed because they're all stupid whores. This whole game without a substance is nothing more than an exercise in attention whoring. This is clear because the game is about a controversial subject and took no skill to make. Feel free to contact the author here at Tumblr link and tell her what you think of the game. So a few unironic virgins were talking about how there's no way a woman could be depressed because she could just literally go outside and have sex. Interesting theory, but okay. She freaked out and cried over the vapid conversations until her journal friends wrote how she was a ooh-woo victim. These supposed trolls were telling her how they didn't care about her game and how she could just stop talking about it. She didn't claim to have gotten her phone number leaked along with other threats, but she has given no proof whatsoever. She brought more negative attention to herself until eventually she was the most talked about person on Wizardchan because she kept feeding the trolls. She also claimed that she had been swatted in an attempt to get her not alive, but there is no proof. In March 2014, Zoe attended a wedding of Phil Fish. Phil Fish is an indie game dev who's best known for working on the game Fez. Keep a pin in that little tidbit, just keep it there for a minute. In August 2014, Depression Quest was finally greenlit on Steam for sale after some pushback from the Steam community. On the exact same day Robin Williams killed himself is the day that Depression Quest was on Steam. Zoe insisted that it was all a coincidence that a game about depression was marketed on the same day that the most well-known and beloved actor killed himself. Okay. Some people criticized Zoe and she was using Robin Williams' death for publicity. Zoe said she considered delaying the release but decided to go through with it and not greatly promote the game right after Robin Williams' death out of respect. But that didn't stop her journal friends from promoting the crap out of it. Later in August, Zoe received a high amount of praise for the game. It was noticeably super high for a game that is indie and essentially made by one person. It was very alarming to gamers who would casually read articles to notice a lot of video game journals wrote articles on Depression Quest. On Zoe's website for Depression Quest, it claimed that a portion of the profits from the game would go to iFred. iFred is a charity that helps people suffering with depression and spread education about mental illness. Milo Yiannopoulos, a now former flamboyant sodomite half-Jewish journalist with overprocessed 90s boy band hair, contacted iFred and asked if they had any affiliation with Zoe, and they had no idea who she was. Zoe then changed her narrative and said it was actually the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that she was actually donating to. But then someone immediately emailed that organization and confirmed that Zoe was fibbing about that affiliation too. She ended up deleting IVRED and the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline off her website, but not before someone screen capped it, because it is the internet after all. It's best to assume everything you put out there is on there forever. Later, IVRED did mention Zoe eventually donated to them, but makes it unclear why she deleted mentioning them from her website in the first place, or why she couldn't just wait to mention IVRED later after she made enough money for her donation. But the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline donation has never been mentioned again or accounted for with the actual donation. Eric Gajoni, a former boyfriend of Quinn, posted a lengthy blog post detailing his relationship with her. I dated Zoe Quinn. I thought she was the most amazing, kind-hearted person in the world. Turns out she was bullshitting pretty much everything I fell in love with her for, and it's actually an unbelievable jerk. She effortlessly lied and manipulated for months simply because it was not believable that someone could be that selfish of a person, that convincing of a liar, and that good of a manipulator, while admittedly arguing against the very principles she espoused. Zoe would later reveal in her book that she had gotten pregnant with Aaron's baby and had an abortion. Guys, remember that pin I was talking about with Phil? Okay, well now you take that pin out, because now we're going to talk about Phil Fish freaking out on Twitter. All you people attacking Zoe are cowards. Attacking a woman is the easiest way you can. Despicable cowards. All of you. All you're doing is making her more visible and giving her message more reach. And revealing yourselves as subhuman little shits that you are. Absolutely pathetic, ballless man boobs. You're essentially rapists. Zoe Quinn sexually harassed me at a friend's wedding earlier March. I didn't think anything of it at the time. You're no friend of mine. You crashed at that wedding. Nobody invited you. Nobody wanted you there, you little shit. Bill was quick to call people rapists for talking about an article involving his friend. But so much for a hashtag believe victims when someone accused Zoe Quinn of sexually harassing them at Phil's wedding. Well, I guess you could say he didn't outright deny it, just that this person is no friend of his and crashed Phil's wedding. Basically a way of shutting them down and invalidating them and getting harassed without Phil being accused of being a rape apologist or something. Now, I couldn't find the sole person who came up with the original hashtag GamerGate, but what I do know is Adam Baldwin, yes, Alec Baldwin's brother, and when I was writing this video, that was before that incident. I don't need to get into that, but yes, before that, Alec Baldwin's brother tweeted it out, hashtag GamerGate. It pretty much blew up all over Twitter after that. The queen is the single most powerful piece on the board, but she cannot mate alone. Pawns are the soul of the hashtag GamerGate. On August 18, 2014, internet aristocrat, aka Mr. Medicare, made a video called Conspiracy Theory, the Five Guys Saga, referencing to the fact that Zoe's ex, Aaron, I'm just gonna call him that, Aaron, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name if you're watching this, accused Zoe of sleeping with 5 guys throughout their relationship. And these weren't just any 5 young men you could find on the street. Nope, these were huge nerds that worked in the video game industry in some form or another. GamerGate was technically formed after the leak, but Zoe wasn't the only face of GamerGate, because years prior there was a trend of articles written by game journalists promoting a social justice agenda. Anita Sarkeesian and Marina Rios were also some of the main people in GamerGate because they were pushing a social justice agenda years prior to the Zoe situation. People who enjoyed video games that were men, white, and straight were getting attacked in these articles with a broad stroke by simply existing. They were just sitting there playing their video games and they were getting foul-mouthed for really no reason except maybe a few bad actors that happened to play video games like to troll people. YouTubers such as Mr. Medicare, Sargon of Akkad, and Monday Matt, just to name a few, started reporting on hashtag GamerGate and Zoe Quinn on their channels. Monday Matt got a copyright strike from Zoe Quinn for showing a screenshot of her game, Depression Quest, for infringing on her intellectual property. You heard that right. A copyright strike. For a screenshot. Copyright strike abuse is definitely not a new thing, that's for sure. So this next section is all alleged for entertainment purposes only. But I'm gonna go over the list of men and spoilers. A girl? Scandalous, that have allegedly slept with Zoe Quinn. Even though I can't prove 100% they actually slept with Zoe, it's important for the narrative to discuss who all these individual people that were getting accused, just so we have an idea of the scope of this situation and all the people that were involved with the gaming industry and who they were and what their status was at the time. The first guy is Joshua Boggs, who was her then boss and was married at the time. Joshua Boggs is an indie game developer who created the game Framed. The name of the game is pretty funny in this context. The second guy accused is Robin Arnett, who is another game dev. The third and fourth guys suspected were Brandon McCartan and Kyle Pulver, but they both outwardly dismissed having anything to do with Zoe. The fifth guy accused is Nathan Grayson. Nathan Grayson is a game journalist who even writes for sites like Kotaku. He also linked Zoe and Robin Arnett together in a failed project they had worked on. A reality TV show about some of the best indie game developers in the business competing Iron Chef style to make an amazing game? Sounds like a great idea, right? You think so, because the story does not unfortunately have a happy ending. According to a report in Indie Game Static, I think that's how you say it, Game Jam was originally conceived as an attempt to widen the audience inside of what a game jam, that is, a rapid-fire creation process, usually done over the course of a few days as a creative exercise, is actually like. To be fair, a show about indie game devs in a reality TV show was pretty much just doomed from the beginning. Now, the last person that got accused of sleeping with Zoe Quinn was Maya Felix Kramer. They now identify as a trans male, just going by Felix, but in this context, we're going to refer Felix as Maya Felix Kramer because it makes sense contextually. Allegedly, it was Maya who helped Zoe into DDoSing the Fine Capitalists, which we'll get more into later. Maya, who is a PR consultant for Silverstring Media, which also represents Anita, and Kotaku. Silverstring Media is a Canadian company that pushes diversity in their digital media, aka social justice. On August 19, 2014, a post on the B board claims to have hacked Zoe Quinn, but B didn't see any evidence and just assumed it was Zoe or one of her cohorts who did it. Reddit and 4chan, more specifically B, were deleting threads banning anyone talking about Zoe Quinn, even if there were threads defending themselves saying that they were never involved with Zoe to begin with. It turns out that Chris Poole, aka Moot, who's the founder and former owner of 4chan, has direct ties with people like Anita Sarkeesian. He's even one of the attendees of XOXO Fest, which featured Anita that same year. A former mod of 4chan who also made a lengthy post detailing that Chris's girlfriend worked for another Hellscape website known as Gawker. Chris also became friendly with Anita after they exchanged phone numbers at her panel. This mod claimed that Anita was one of the reasons why topics like GamerGate were being deleted, and Crack.com threatened to write a slander piece against 4chan and its users. This mod also said that the feminists wanted IPs and doxes of everyone who was pro-GamerGate, and that Chris wanted to leave 4chan. There's hardly any evidence to show that there was a group of feminists trying to dox everyone using 4chan to push GamerGate's propaganda, but Chris did in fact leave 4chan in January 2015 to work with Google. But people theorize that Chris left because more of the fappening and the huge amount of lawsuits that came from the fallout rather than GamerGate specifically. The TLDR, the fappening, is a lot of celebrity news got leaked. A lot. Never fall for phishing emails, people. It's what caused the fappening, essentially. But this all happened in August 31st, 2014. Yes, the same month GamerGate happened. Also the fact that 4chan was a huge money hole for Chris and that did not generate enough advertising funds to make a profit. The Fine Young Capitalists was a charity organization founded with the goal of helping women and other underrepresented groups to get involved with video game design. It was also a competition for women to pitch their video games so they could be voted in as a winner to make their games. The top pitches were given to an artist for storyboarding, then the art would be put online for public voting. In February 2014, Zoe was annoyed that a charity benefiting women in video games wasn't going directly to her friends, or her. She accused the organization of being transphobic and not paying their winners. They fought mostly on Twitter. The Fine Young Capitalists clarified that they do allow trans women in their policy, regardless if they had or plan on having gender reassignment surgery. The only rule was the participant had to identify as a woman prior to March 11, 2014, which is a whole month after the charity was announced. There was even an email from the Fine Young Capitalist administrator that clarified that the rules of gender identity were in place to prepare the off chance someone decided to change their gender identity solely for the purpose of winning the contest. A contest made for women to win. The admin even said that they mathematically estimated about 10% of their applicants would be men, but it turned out to be about 8%, which is fairly close. This was also a policy to protect people if being trans was illegal in their country, because when they did eventually get the money, the information would be given to the government for taxes, which would say the applicant identifies as a woman. But the damage was already done. Zoe Sisyphus managed to get the Fine Young Capitalist website taken down by her followers, DDoSing the site, which she then proceeded to brag about. Law, we blew up the website and it's returning over quota errors. How fucking appropriate. Oh yeah, you guys remember that Maya Kramer person we talked about earlier? Well, they get brought up again. They also helped out Zoe with DDoSing the Fine Young Capitalist website. Here's both of them bragging about it right here. We exploded their website. OMG us. Oops, we DDoS something on accident. I like how a conversation between me and @LegoButts resulted in accidentally killing an exploitative startup's website. And not only that, they both got accused of doxing one of the staff members' website for the Fine Young Capitalist. So a gamer journalist named Jonathan Ross, who was a writer for Destructoid, went on these people's Facebooks and added their real names. After Jonathan Ross found their private information, Maya Kramer, who was, again, bragging about working with Zoe to getting the Fine Young Capitalist website taken down, retweeted the private information that Jonathan just shared for even more people to see.
She fucking doxed me. Ruined a production for women, refused to contact us, and is currently taking money for a game jam with no start date, no location, and no judges. Okay, here is my story. We ran a group that literally said, any woman come up with an idea for a video game, we'll give you concept art so you can pitch your game, and we'll put all the pitches online. The internet will vote on the best one, and we'll make that game and give the profits to charity. If you get a lot of interest online and want to make the game on your own, you can leave the contest at any time. Literally everyone that was in the top 5 didn't have programming experience, so they couldn't make their own game. She was like, why do you expect women to work for free to make games? We said, well, they get 8% of the money as royalties, and they just have to give an idea. Other people will make the game, and the profits go to charity. Doesn't matter, it's oppressive. She started a fucking Twitter storm, crashed our website, got my personal information doxxed, got us banned from Twitter. We email reporters what's up, and they're like, duh, if Zoe says it's oppressive, it must be true. Maybe you should give her money for Rebel Jam, which has no start date, location, or any other information, but totally isn't a scam. This happens at 3 other major publications. We literally said we'd pay her to consult on future projects, and we'd close down the contest if she would explain to us what exactly is offensive. No response. No response at all. Unless a reporter contacted her, and then she's the victim. All this information is fucking online. The pitches are online, we did everything we said, but no online journalist will publish the story. Please vote. Even if we don't raise enough money, if we show there's enough interest, we can get a winner a grant to make their game. I'm literally making no money on this contest. I just wanted to focus on something other than women being oppressed. I wanted to show that they made good games, and everyone said that's not what women in games want to talk about.
Eventually, 4chan found out about the Fine Young Capitalist situation. After being shamed, shunned, and banned from their own board, 4chan united together to help out the Fine Young Capitalist. 4chan helped them raise over $71,000. They even got their own original OC. Now, websites allowing people to customize and make their own name and help, vote in these names that are customizable are pretty much a nail in the coffin for spamming and trolling. Take Bodie McBoatface, for example. Now, 4chan coming up with the original character goes together like pickle juice and grape jelly. Green and purple, which are the colors that they chose for their original character, Vivian James. Now, Vivian's appearance wasn't hyper-feminine or sexualized like you assume a bunch of male gamers would like. Instead, she looked like and dressed like any normal girl who likes video games would probably dress like every day. Her main colors of green and purple came from the Dragon Ball Z meme known as the Daily Dose, a meme I will not describe on here for you, and I don't recommend you looking up, and don't blame me when you do. Vivian would later become one of the main mascots for GamerGate. The winner of the Fine Young Capitalist competition would be Danielle Marino. I hope I'm saying that name correctly, I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. The video game would be called Afterlife Empire and would be sold on Steam on August 21st, 2015. The Fine Young Capitalist tried making a peace treaty with Zoe Quinn. According to them, Zoe agreed to sign it, and they both agreed to leave each other alone, but eventually she backed out on the agreement. When he explained that she had retweeted Maya's doxing information, Zoe explained that Maya was not associated with her, a point which goes against Maya's webpage and Twitter conversation, and attempted to manipulate the situation and blame it on Maya. In September 2014, Zoe filed a 209A temporary restraining order against Aaron. She was granted the restraining order. In the order, it would say Aaron was not to post any further information about the plaintiff or her personal life online to encourage hate mobs. On the 30th of September 2014, a court hearing was held in which the judge granted the order to be made permanent, 1 year in duration. On October 23, 2014, a scan of Zoe's affidavit dated September 16th was posted online. Please note all the scribbles and spelling errors in an official government document. On October 13, 2014, Zoe was invited to be a live guest in the Huffington Post segment. At first she agreed, but in typical Zoe fashion, she backed out when someone she couldn't handle was also going to be there during the segment, which would have turned into a debate. That person was Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels, aka Frederick Brannon. Hot Wheels was a former owner of WizardChan and founder of 8chan. The HuffPost interview proceeded without Zoe in attendance, and I couldn't find any archives of this particular interview. I tried. On October 14, 2014, the day after the HuffPost interview, Know Your Meme did an interview with Hot Wheels.
I've heard you used to frequent WizardChan. What was your involvement in the community? Were you there to witness the dramatic showdown between Zoe Quinn and members of the community as it happened? I first became involved in WizardChan when I saw it linked on 4chan.net. I was a regular poster until the original administrator of the site, Mr. Pacific, wanted to sell it. He was tired of the site and needed money. The community was very small, but I decided to buy it from him, and I was the administrator from March 2013 to September 2013. I resigned from the site because the main rule of the site is that only male virgins are allowed to post, and I lost this status. I was friends with the subsequent admin of WizardChan, Glaive, who was in charge during the Zoe drama. The way it was described in the media is not the way that it happened at all. Many WizardChan users are very depressed and have trouble even ordering pizza over the telephone, much less calling someone they don't know and making threats. The threatening posts made on WizardChan were made by Zoe herself for attention and by trolls from other websites, as was confirmed by IP checks. Some media outlets recanted their story, but by then, the damage was already done.
In January 2015, Zoe co-founded Crash Override with then-boyfriend Alex Lifshitz, who consequently enough also has direct ties with the gaming industry. Alex worked at Obsidian Entertainment on Fallout New Vegas as a production intern. Crash Override was supposed to be a private network of experts to assist in victims in online harassment. Now you may be thinking to yourself, golly gee, that sure does sound familiar. Well, it probably sounds like bully hunters.
You can still hear the harassment in the background. It doesn't stop. So now Bully Hunter 77 is looking for the harasser. And it looks like she's going to use her knife, folks. And there it is, just pause right there. Let's back up and see that again. A brilliant knife move, very difficult. And look right there, see in the lower left-hand corner, let's pause that and zoom into that. Our bully hunter left the calling card message to the harasser. Harassment is not a game. bullyhunters.org. Now that's what this is all about.
But, see, Miss Gwendolyn Jones, she's an inventor. She is profound. She came up with Crash Override 3 years prior to Bully Hunters. Crash Override formed a partnership with Feminist Frequency in March 2016, which actually served as Crash's sponsorship. And who owns Feminist Frequency? Well, Feminist Frequency is a website owned and operated by Anita Sarkeesian. Well, isn't that also convenient and financially beneficial for both of them? I also tried finding any known cases where Zoe and Alex managed to help out people for their help of online harassment. Alas, I could not find any tangible evidence for them helping out anyone. Zoe said that her clients they had would email them from time to time if needed, but again, no such evidence from what I could find. Their excuse was, oh, it's for their clients' privacy. But how is anyone going to believe Zoe Quinn ran a legitimate business without any public examples? Even if it were for the safety of their clients, to keep their identities private, Zoe and Alex could have released censored emails, names, and other pieces of incriminating information to point out the identities of the clients, just to show that they had proof of a legitimate business. But no, that didn't happen. GamerGate was a huge, weird phenomenon that happened in 2014. It was 2 years prior to the US presidential election. The hashtag feminism, hashtag girlboss culture was sweeping even the mainstream media to capitalize on a socio-political movement. So with all these factors in place, it was only a matter of time until Hollywood and new job offers came towards Zoe Quinn's face. On February 11, 2015, Law & Order aired their GamerGate-inspired episode called Intimidation Game. An episode that featured Toby Turner, aka Tobuscus, who went from successful YouTuber to actor, and Jake Paul, who went from actor to successful YouTuber. H3H3 started their YouTube careers reacting to the episode, which boosted their notoriety even more. Which goes to show how small the entertainment business world actually is. The episode, which had really nothing to do with actual Gamergate, other than it being about women's sexual harassment and sort of involving video games, no one, not even feminists directly involved with Gamergate, seemed to enjoy it. It was a quick cash grab and a fart in the wind the feminism and video games movement as a whole. Miss Quinn was really starting to feel her oats and getting tons of job offers. Because of course getting a huge campaign of stalkers is the best way of growing your business nowadays. Zoe also appeared in the documentary GTFO, but only at the end. It was free for a while on YouTube, so that's how I ended up watching it, but it's really bad. I wouldn't recommend it. It's 1, boring, and 2, super biased. Like, you don't hear any opposite opinion other than women in video games get harassed, okay? But hey, I am not a film reviewer, so more on Zoe Quinn. In June 2015, Zoe was implanted with an actual microchip called a.k.a. That's a mouthful. The first thing Zoe did with the Alex Jones triggering chip was download the code for the game Days X. She also had a magnet in her left ring finger. Zoe then wrote in the expansion pack for the board game, Betrayal at the House on the Hill. I hope I didn't ruin any family board game nights for you after saying that. On September 24th, 2015, Zoe and Anita spoke at the United Nations about online harassment. TLDR, harassing women bad actually. It was for a totally legitimate cause and not begging for the money from affluent members of the UN. On November 6, 2015, The Wrap reported on talks of a Gamergate movie. Amy Pascal, who's a pretty big Hollywood producer, was allegedly working with this film. Supposedly Scarlett Johansson was being eyed for the lead role. The name of the film was allegedly going to be even named Crash Override. So other than this article, there hasn't been any updates to this movie, so we can only assume it was in production and it got quickly cancelled. They really chose a flattering photo of Amy, didn't they? It looks like she's making the poggers face. In September 2016, Zoe was allegedly working with a parody erotica author, Chuck Tingle. It was also to be a full-motion dating simulator like that of Night Trap. The working title would be called Project Tingle. Project Tingle was a Chuck Tingle-inspired game that was co-written by Zoe and Cohen Edenfield. Cohen Edenfield was actually one of the writers for HiveSpot and has a history with working on the main story for Homestuck. Alex Lifshitz, because of course he was also working on this, was the producer of the game. But you know who wasn't involved with the game whatsoever? Why, none other than Chuck Tingle himself. Yep, you heard that right. Chuck had no involvement with the game whatsoever. Now, his convenient excuse he has no experience with video games or coding them, but if that's the case, why couldn't he be involved with writing? What Zoe and her team were making were essentially a visual novel. Even though dating sims and visual novels are considered video games, the experience of playing them is a lot closer to reading a book rather than playing a traditional video game. Unless left mouse clicking is considered the new high-stakes video game playing, which I'm sure most video game journalists probably think so. They ended up making $85,448 at the end of their Kickstarter, which had the goal of 69420 because you get a lay random meme number. There are no updates that have been posted on their Kickstarter even to this day about the status of the game. The only information about the game was from Vice News and the video Zoe Quinn promoted to the game. In December 2016, Crash Override's hotline was closed, but who knows what that really means because again, there's no evidence of Zoe ever actually helping anyone in the first place. The most we have to go by is Zoe Quinn's word, which has always been 100% solid truth. Nowadays, Crash Override website is more like an advice column than a huge investigative multi-network. On January 13, 2017, Zoe came out in a Tumblr post as non-binary. In the post, she stated how she struggled with an eating disorder to make herself look more skinny and show less of her secondary sex characteristics. Zoe even wore big baggy clothing to hide her body. She also claimed that she had started smoking at the age of 12 to make it sound like she had a chain smoker's voice. Zoe made a pretty outrageous claim saying that her ex Aaron tried outing Zoe as non-binary during the Zoe post, but there's no evidence for that claim. Zoe claimed to have bought a binder 2 years prior. She would also post on Instagram from time to time dressed up as more boyish to express her gender identity. On March 21st, 2017, Jimmy E, who was Zoe's ex, but more like a fling because the relationship only lasted for a week, showed up on the Ralph Retort to explain his relationship with her. The relationship started a little after Zoe's pornography career, which according to Jimmy, she lied about ever doing before they started dating. Allegedly, she told Jimmy that she worked as the secretary for a porn business. Jimmy claimed Zoe used him for money, sex, and for someone to vent to when it was convenient for her. He also said she told him she got ran over by a car a few days into their dating, which probably isn't the weirdest excuse to get out of a date, but it's probably up there. In September 2017, Zoe published her memoir, Crash Override: How GamerGate Nearly Destroyed My Life and How We Can Win the Fight Against Online Hate. Which again, I have it right here. It's probably, is it backwards? Probably backwards. Oh wait, that's why it's backwards. Dummy. Which, don't get mad at me for buying. This is off of thrift books, okay? I didn't give Zoe any bit of my money before somebody screams at me. And if you happen to be at Allegheny County Library System, so if you happen to be in Allegheny County and you happen to check out this very book, I probably own the same book that you checked out. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, spooky, what's with all these colorful tags right here? Well, I decided to bookmark it. So blue means an exaggeration of the truth, so that means like she's probably making a statement, but it's so over exaggerated where it's like a half truth. And then yellow stands for a bold-faced lie, and then red literally means red flag. So she's saying something that I consider a red flag. And you can see it's very colorful. Look, I wanted to read her side of the story just to verify my own bias, right? Because if I'm gonna report on somebody, I have to understand both sides, right? And did she convince me that anything that she said in this book was halfway truthful after all the research I've done? Clearly not. But if you guys want me to go into more of a thorough explanation of, I've read this book so you don't have to, about all my points of contention with this book, just leave a like on this video and leave a comment asking for it, and I will make the video. Of course, whenever Zoe released this book, she was getting tons of praise from her journalist friends. They were saying all the typical things like how stunning and brave she was. But there was this one comment from a woman claiming to be friends with Zoe's mother and the Amazon review list.
Customer review. I initially bought this book optimistic that a Brie child I watched grow up and prospered surmounted ... by Ovate, September 9th, 2017. I initially bought this book optimistic that a brilliant child that I watched grow up had prospered and surmounted almost impossible negativity, but was profoundly shocked from the onset. The first chapters contained multiple falsehoods regarding her childhood, and I just quit reading. Her mother is a close friend of many years. Our daughters grew up together. Nobody deserves the horrors endured at the hands of misogyny rampant in the gaming industry as described. Certainly not Chelsea, Zoe, who tried to help those experiencing depression, but ironically, in her own words, had little sympathy for her own mother with depression, other than perceiving herself as a victim. Zoe is a talented writer. Wish it was more factual, because it does cast doubts on the accuracy of the rest of the tale. Also, wish she was more appreciative of the small-town, morally sound, traditionally rich childhood that she actually had.
And again, we can't tell whether or not this person is telling the truth because we really have no evidence if they even know Zoe in the first place. But what we can do is defer to the fact that multiple people over the course of Zoe's life have said that she lies and lies and lies again. The only thing we can back up from the claim of Zoe Mom's friend is the text conversation between Aaron and Zoe. Zoe in 2014 lied to Aaron about her mom dying. Now, could this prove that Zoe Quinn is a sociopath with no real human emotions? I don't know, I'm not a doctor. What this does prove is how little of a disregard she has for her mother. And her not being able to feel anything was probably just from her lying to begin with. In January 2018, Zoe was announced as the narrative designer for the upcoming game Solar Ash Kingdom, now released as Solar Ash. In June 2018, Zoe would take a break from working on video games to start a writing career for comics. She would work with illustrator Robbie Rodriguez in DC Vertigo's Goddess Mode. Now, Robbie is a gosh darn hoot. Now, during August 2018, this little thing called ComicsGate was happening for reasons, you guessed it, ethics in the comic book industry. It's always in August for a reason these crazy things happen. I guess it's just the heat makes people go nuts. Ethan Van Sciver is a comic book artist like Robbie is. Ethan was very pro-ComicsGate and a known detractor for the social justice narrative that was being pushed in comics. So what does this totes sane social justice Dalmau type person Robbie do in retaliation? Well, he flashes his chocolate starfish at Ethan. Yes, Robbie, in front of God and thousands of other people, spread cheeks to own the pro-ComicsGate people for some weird mathematical 5D chess reason that we probably can't even see, but that's what Robbie did. Obviously, I can't show the pictures on YouTube, nor can I recommend you look at them, but they're pretty gross. Not the prettiest, they're just bad. Robbie then realized that showing his hole was a bad idea, actually. Then decided to scrub his Twitter, clean up all of his tweets to, cover his rear. Goddess Mode ended only after 6 issues. By this time, Miss Quinn was getting stressed, so she did what anyone else in her situation would do. Go on a super expensive, lavish vacation to Tokyo, Japan for months on end. People figured out the hotel suite she was staying at could have had up to 4 attendees and was $300 a night. Now, none of this would have mattered if she'd chosen to go on a vacation in her own time, but she hadn't updated her information or gained towards her Kickstarter funders in 8 months. So people were thinking maybe, just maybe, that this Kickstarter money was being used towards Zoe's partying instead of an actual game. In August 2019, Zoe Quinn accused Alex Hawaka of physically, emotionally, and sexually abusing her. Alex Hawaka was an indie game developer and founder of the gaming companies Infinite Ammo, Infinite Fall, and BitBlot. He was mainly known for the popular indie game titles such as Night in the Woods and Aquaria. Again, I'll just have Jim read all these screenshots because they're already out there.
I want to say up front that I'm not saying this for anyone but me and the other people that I have known who have been hurt by him and might in the future be hurt. I read Natalie Lawhead's post about her rapist being an industry legend who took advantage of her and poisoned her career, and it shook me to my core. Her waning health, her fear, the way she described all of it feeling like drowning, and my heart broke for her. Beyond that, I felt ashamed. So many of the little details down to the timing had been things I've gone through. Just a few months into my time as an indie game developer, and it's haunted me every day since. It's why I don't go to GDC anymore. I'm drowning too. A few months into making games, I was sexually assaulted. My visa status was threatened if I told anyone, and he went out of his way to tell the community that I'd been falsely accusing him of rape when I hadn't said anything to anyone. But a third party who saw it happen firsthand confronted him about it the next day. This story isn't about him. After years of therapy and working on myself, he reached out and apologized for everything. And I've forgiven him. But that's the background to this story. 1 month after the assault, I wanted to leave Toronto. I was scared I couldn't sleep, and I almost killed myself over it. I had a suicide note and everything ready to go, but I just didn't want to do that to my roommate. Enter Alec Hawaka. Yeah, the one from Aquaria and Nights in the Woods. He was one person who I felt like, in my newly chosen field, had my back. He talked about how great and cheap Winnipeg was, and we flirted and talked on Skype for hours. You know, I was in an incredibly vulnerable place, and he asked me to come visit him in Winnipeg to see if I'd want to start an indie house there with 3 friends I'd been talking about the idea with, and to see if the thing between us was as cool as it seemed, at a distance. 2 weeks. I'd buy the plane ticket there, he'd buy my plane ticket back. He knew I couldn't afford it otherwise, so that was the deal. I wouldn't get home for a month, and only then it was because my roommate used his miles to get me out of his apartment that he had physically confined me to. While I was in Winnipeg, he slowly isolated me from everyone else in my life, while absolutely degrading me whenever we were alone. He convinced me to talk to the three friends out of getting a shared place with me there. He convinced me to let him program my game instead of the friend that I had been working with, despite many protests. He screamed at me for over an hour once because of the tone in my voice when I said hello. He wouldn't let me leave the apartment without him, and he refused to give me the code to get back in. About the sexual assault, he blamed me. He said he was jealous of me to be wanted like that. He'd bring it up during sex, where he'd regularly be mean and violent. He told me he loved me in a way no one else would, because he could see that I was terrible, and he loved me anyway. And I bought it, because that's how you feel when you're recovering from being sexually assaulted. I spent a lot of that month hiding from him in the bathroom. His moods would shift and he'd throw things and hurt himself, seemingly at random, and blame me. He'd jam his fingers inside me and walk me around the house by them when I told him it hurt. I was scared to leave. I was scared to tell anyone. He'd act normal when other people were around and lay into me as soon as we were alone, then apologize and say how much he needed and loved me. I got even more scared when the 2 weeks had passed and he kept putting off the agreed plane ticket home. I spent a lot of that time hiding in the bathroom from him. My roommate started to get scared and asked me if I needed help getting out. I said yes, and Alec barely looked at me as I left. When I got home, I sent a cordial and friendly breakup email. He lashed out and banned me from an indie game community he ran, banned himself, then went to other industry legends asking them to help him kill himself because I was such a bitch. He made sure to blacklist me at important industry events. He tried to ruin the career I'd barely started. To a degree, it worked. That night the night GG started, I vague booked about it without specifying which ex and two other women in games immediately messaged me to ask if it was Alec. He'd done similar things to them. They knew he'd been fixated on me and were also too afraid to speak up about an industry legend. It's been the better part of a decade, and I'm still afraid of him. Too afraid to speak out, especially because I've gone through so much publicly. Like, people will just roll their eyes and ignore me as if there's a karmic limit on how much bad shit can happen to someone before people stop listening. I'm afraid that people will care more about their love of Night in the Woods than they will about the safety and truths of women and non-binary people in video games. I'm still afraid of him. I'm afraid of telling anyone about it. I'm afraid of how many indies have seen this behavior and given him a pass. I'm afraid of being in the same room as him because I'm afraid he'll hurt me again. I'm afraid of all the developers who watched this happen and watched him scream abuse at other women out front of MozCon during GDC. But being silent for years has been worse than fear. I skipped the last 2 GDCs because I couldn't risk being around him or seeing everyone clap for him on stage. Especially not the people who know. I don't wish any ill will on anyone. I know Alec is likely not well, and I will always believe in rehabilitation over punishment. I don't want anything bad to come of this to his collaborators who may not have known any of this. I've watched big enough names in the indie community know about him, so much so that the reaction to his first meltdown about me was, "Oh well, that's Alec, what can you do?" And I've seen enough to know nothing's going to happen about this particular broken stare, unless someone says something. But we're all scared. I'm scared. A big childish part of me has been hoping people would somehow start caring or figure it out on their own. But feeling like a coward in the face of Natalie's strength, feeling like I have to hide from my own life because it's not safe and I can't tell anyone why I'm hiding, of knowing I wasn't the first or the last, of drowning, that's too much for me to keep carrying. I just want the other boot to drop so I can breathe again. I don't want another new dev to get hurt and hear the same, "Oh, that's just how he is." After the fact that I did, I just want to breathe again.
The following day after the accusation dropped, the Night in the Woods developer team dropped all ties with Alec. Scott Benson would go to the official Night in the Woods Twitter and announce, This week, allegations of past abuse have come to light regarding Alec Hawaka, who was coder, composer, and co-designer on Night in the Woods. We take such allegations seriously as a team. As a result, and after some agonizing consideration, we are cutting ties with Alec. The game's publisher, Finji, condoned the team's decision and stopped all physical copies of Night in the Woods being made. Almost literally overnight, Alec lost everything he worked up for his whole career. On August 31st, 2019, 5 days after Zoe made her accusation, Alec killed himself. Alec's sister was the one to announce his passing. She also mentioned how it's not Zoe's fault because he wished for the best for her. Maybe Alec happened to say that in passing towards his sister one time, but obviously there was nothing to back up her statement. People were just chalking it up to Alex's sister being a feminist and still holding up her values of believing sexual assault victims. But I think the more likely situation was, in my personal opinion, is that she was so stressed about her brother literally just killing himself that she wanted to shut down all conversations and discourse on his behalf. Now, my own personal opinion, this is probably controversial, is, suicide is a choice, and Alex chose to not get help, right? Now, I can't disprove Zoe Quinn's sexual assault accusations, but I can't prove them either. And this all should matter in the point of, law. Law is the one that should be taking care of this. But the law of public opinion almost matters just as much when it comes to situations like this, unfortunately. This situation happened 2 years after the Me Too movement exposed a bunch of sex pests working in Hollywood. Plus you have added the social politics being pushed by feminists to believe victims. Because if you deny or question the narrative of someone calling someone else who's in power a sexual predator, you're victim blaming. So you have this super destructive formula of the Me Too movement, social pressure, and feminist politics to concoct a recipe for financial disaster. If these companies that the employee of being accused of being a sex pest don't act accordingly. So Alec lost his livelihood, his friends, and potentially family members after this accusation by Zoe Quinn. To deny Zoe's involvement in Alec's decision to kill himself, in my opinion, all alleged, is to deny reality on Zoe's influence and power that she has in the gaming industry. Because Zoe is a very powerful person. Because guess who got accused of sexual assault and kept their career? And guess who didn't? You guys remember that earlier, that Phil Fish wedding story? You remember what happened to the guy who accused Zoe of sexually assaulting him? Phil publicly shamed him and got him to shut up. Zoe is still alive. Alex killed himself. So as you can imagine, Zoe took a break from the internet after that hashtag fiasco of her ex-boyfriend killing himself. She kept it really low during the year of 2019. She would later admit that she magically ran out of $85,448 of the Kickstarter money for a game she'll probably never update or finish. Instead of taking responsibilities for her actions or explaining somehow she managed to burn a hole in her wallet so fast, she instead blamed the fact that she accumulated debt and has a day job writing for games. Nowadays, Zoe just posts TikToks and pictures of her creating cosplays. She also is trying to get fit, which is great and all, but she should probably not stand so close to objects with straight lines like door frames if she's going to Photoshop herself to look skinnier. She's currently working on a tabletop RPG game called Blackbirds. This game is currently being crowdfunded through Kickstarter, and we all know Zoe's history with that, and has not been released as of writing this video. So yeah, Zoe still has a thriving career despite all of her controversies. Somehow she has IRL plot armor. I don't wish ill will on Zoe, I just wish she would take some responsibilities for her actions instead of narcissistically blaming everyone but herself. But hey, maybe she's actually a genius, because all of her complaining that she's done has actually financially benefited her. She's probably one of the most successful women, or I guess non-binary person, in the gaming industry. Or should I say, she is the most successful person to work in the gaming industry that doesn't actually work on games. Now to answer the original question, what is GamerGate? If you ask the average Joe if he knows what GamerGate is, he probably won't know what the hell you're talking about. If you ask someone who's internet savvy, they know what GamerGate is. They can tell you what it is. And if you ask a gamer they know what GamerGate is. They're probably just sitting there crying, pissing and shitting their pants right now from the PTSD that it gave them. Some people even say that the reason why Donald Trump got elected was because of their influence in GamerGate. I watched so many philosophy videos of people trying to discuss the cultural zeitgeist that was GamerGate, but the conclusion I came up with is if you ask 10 different people about what GamerGate was, you can get potentially 10 different answers. So, after spending hundreds of hours researching and watching videos and reading a freaking book, what is my conclusion about GamerGate? To me, GamerGate was less of a cultural, historical zeitgeist and more of a financial cash grab. Because holy shit, it doesn't matter if you were a super liberal social justice warrior or if you were more right-leaning, I guess, or more of like reasonable commentary channel, whatever they call it, like, you know, the people, the detractors of the pro-GamerGate people. There was so much money to be made. Game journalists were getting so much money from clicks on their website, and the detractors were getting money from people donating to them, be like, I agree with this actually, and donating to their streams or, you know, their Patreons or whatever. There was also the trolls too. The trolls are what we call chaotic evil. That's a game term. I don't know if you know that if you're not a gamer. It's a gaming term. D&D. So what the trolls would do is they would go and harass the feminists, but they would also go and harass and dox the people that were the detractors. So the feminists looked at the situation and be like, okay, we're getting actually harassed, and they would write articles on it. And then people who, you know, maybe they didn't know that much about GamerGate were just kind of on the sidelines looking at it, were like, okay, maybe a woman getting sent like hundreds of pizzas at her door is actually bad, you know, or they're actually getting harassed, which in a certain way they were getting harassed. And then you had the people like, let's say, Sargon of Akkad, that were fighting against the journalists because people like Sargon were getting accused of harassing them, and he would argue, you know, the ethics in journalism and gaming journalism because they were just blatantly, you know, they were blaming people like Sargon of harassing. Like, it wasn't him. It was the trolls, and then the trolls would just, you know, go in return and harass people like Sargon just as bad. Everyone got shit canned. No one was safe. But again, the biggest, most influential thing that came out of GamerGate was money. So whenever I hear someone say, compare something to GamerGate, or let's say someone says, we need to have a GamerGate 2.0, or we need to get Trump to retweet GamerGate 2.0. I just assume that maybe the money's running dry, or, you know, maybe they're like, oh, I could just, you know, financially benefit from this. Especially just assume anytime you hear GamerGate in the current year, you hear ka-ching, ka-ching money sounds right after. The other biggest thing that came out of GamerGate though was now the term journos is a slur against journalists. That's pretty good too. But the biggest lesson of them all that come out of GamerGate, I think, is sometimes the pussy just ain't worth it.
GamerGate.
So have you paid any attention to GamerGate? You know what GamerGate is?
No, what's that about?
I'm fucking completely baffled.
Thanks to the internet and the breakout success of Marvel's cinematic universe, the overwhelmingly male world of nerd culture suddenly belonged to everyone.
I'm not kidding you. I went down and picked up boulders today.
As the internet brought diverse new fans to the boys' club of nerddom, a reactionary movement arose to keep women and marginalized people away from their fan communities.
No, like I said earlier, if it weren't for Father Michael, I would have given far less good head. I mean,
there was a real Father Michael?
So much less, you know, he's going to get killed now, but...
Okay, let me take a look at this here in a second.
No, you're taking way too long, Matt. You're guilty as fuck. Take a screenshot. Well, we want to see what you reported, all right?
Stop fucking around. It's been like fucking 8 minutes.
Jesus Christ,
Take a
dude.
screenshot and show him. No, I'm sick of you lying. You're such a fucking snake. And everybody can see through it.
And when we look at 90% of the tweets about you are neutral and then a few percent are positive, can we say that GamerGate has really endorsed these attacks on you in spite of the fact that more than 90% of the discussion of you on Twitter is not negative, right?
David, I can show you dozens of death threats that I've received.
I don't doubt they exist.
There's been a bit of an interesting development with Miss Sarkeesian, if you'd like to hear about it. Well, Pete, tell people who she is.
I don't even know if I need to, but
most people don't know.
Well,
you live in a very insulated world.
Why do you guys act like only women face harassment online? You guys constantly feed the trolls. And look, the majority of the people here are the trolls because they like to see you freak out about it. That's exactly what you guys are doing.
I mean, even your language, like freak out about, like no.
See, you're just mocking me. You're just mocking one
left-wing feminists, and these are sort of far-left, Israel-hating, socialist weirdos.
In the work that I do, I look at hundreds of examples of video games,
so
and
can you think of three? Can you think of three?
I can, but I think it's a bigger issue to talk about the industry as a whole.
I reckon we can get Donald Trump to defend GamerGate.
Terrifying video.
This is my car, and now the bitch shit is crashed.
We claimed he crashed his car on the way to my house.
And look at this bullshit! Look at this shit! I'm just raising God and this person! And this is all because of it! And Messi's terrorist!
He is just screaming like an absolute lunatic. It is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
That I can get angry and whatever, but in my absolute defense here, which is really not giving much of a defense, nothing was taken down.
Look at all those tabs!
I have a lot of tabs open, but I have...
Thanks for reporting!
That one... But nothing on...
Now, wait a minute!
Nothing on that. That's just...
What the fuck?
So, I have been in not the best place mentally. And
now, wait a minute, Matt! No! Matt, no!
GamerGate organized on the same underground message boards that would later lead to the QAnon cult.
The large majority of us gamers, millions of gamers, are fucking neutral. After all of the drama over these months have calmed down, you see that the GG movement is relatively small but vocal group on Twitter.
What the fuck is GamerGate? Video game journalism?
She was able to turn people trolling her into a huge amount of super positive media attention. On the other hand, when I get death threats over my videos, no one ever gives me anything.